Good afternoon and welcome back to the expansion of consciousness. We're going to have a very, very special guest today. We're so glad that you guys have tuned in once again to, understand consciousness techniques, understand how to live your life in a different way, all by using things that we have control over, the power within us. Um, as usual, we're live on YouTube. We're live on Facebook. So if you want to follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. I'll be putting those links out there throughout the show. But YouTube is a platform that we're on. If you want to follow us on YouTube, just go to @Expansion of Consciousness on YouTube. But I want to talk about a very special guest that we have on today, Mr. Jim Marshall. Mr. Marshall is a polymathic intellectual who has devoted 50,000 hours to the study and practice of multiple dimensions of human potential and development. He has received a classical education as an honor student at Jesuit Military Prep School and was accepted into engineering school while a junior in prep school and attended college on an academic scholarship. He graduated with a Bachelor of Science cum laude while still an undergraduate. He began the study of alternative arts and sciences, which today will be described as transformational and holistic. Eventually, he became a professional practitioner, and after 28 years of formal education, he had a long career as a human development engineer. Jim has integrated the best aspects of most advanced techniques on the planet and has expanded their limits by his own research and discovery. He has successfully treated and trained hundreds of clients over a 40-year career and is the inventor of Septemics and several conscious expanding systems. His areas of expertise include psychology, philosophy, theology, parapsychology, science, engineering, mathematics, law, literature, history, music, organizations, metaphysics, military science, physical culture, and education. I'm talking about a man over a 40-year career, just absolutely blessed with the level of knowledge and genius that he's going to share with us today. And I'm going to go ahead and bring on Mr. Jim Marshall right now. Jim, how are you today?
Hi, Jason. Glad to be here.
All right, all right. I just read what an impressive biography. The number of hours you put into your training and education, and just becoming and starting a career as a human development engineer. And I know a lot of people may not know what that is, but you've done a lot of research and you've made a lot of discoveries over your time. Tell us how that all started for you, Jim.
Well, I could start really as a child, but I don't want to spend that much time on it. So I'll start when I was 16,
Gotcha.
and I was accepted into an elite engineering school,
Hmm.
which I attended on scholarship. Now, like every other engineer, I thought I was going to be engineering something in the physical universe, such as electrons, airfoils, motors, and so forth.
Yeah.
But by the time I had my bachelor's degree, I realized that I wanted to engineer the human psyche
Mm.
because that is where we're failing miserably. 95% of the problems in the industrialized world are problems with humans because we don't understand them, we can't communicate with them. Uh, that's the problem because all the techniques and the physical technology we have, all that is largely solved now. You don't have a lot of people starving to death and getting eaten by lions, but you have a lot of people getting divorced, sued, arrested, drug addiction. So I got into that field, and I had a very long career as a human development engineer,
Mm.
working one-on-one with hundreds of people over thousands of hours. Now, while this was happening, I started to observe that my clients would improve in ways that were predictable to me. Although I never told this to anyone, but I made notes. In other words, I would look at the client and I would observe that he was at a certain level that I had previously observed.
Mm-hmm.
And I would know as a result of the session, he was going to go to the next level up that I had previously observed. And of course, this made me even better at what I did. I knew the outcome of the session. Now, I never told anything like this to any of my clients or anybody else, but I made notes. And over the years, I came to realize that my clients were moving up scales. In other words, they were improving in predictable ways.
Okay.
And by about 1995, I had about 32 scales of varying lengths that I had just written down, because this had happened thousands and thousands of times while I was working with people. And so after I had these written down, I started observing these in life. I observed not only people going up the scales, but people going down the scales. People didn't go down the scales in the session, they only went up. But outside, they went down as well. So this just verified it for me. Now, by 1995, I had a particular scale that had 6 levels that I absolutely knew axiomatically was correct, because I had been using it successfully for many decades.
And what does the scale entail?
Well, it's called the scale of basic purposes.
Okay.
But let me tell you how I found it, because that will explain a lot.
Gotcha.
I had this scale of basic purposes, although it didn't get that name until later on, because I had to do research to really determine what it was that I was measuring, what the axis was, because I got the scales because they just fell out in front of me, but I had to research them to develop all the information around them. So now I realized in 95 that this 6th level scale that I had been using for decades actually had a 7th level. This was a big epiphany for me. And when I inserted that 7th level into the 6th level scale, it manifested mathematically.
Wow.
Now, coming from a hard science background, I took 26 semesters of math and loved every minute of it. So I think in math, I really understand it.
It's a language.
When I saw that, I realized that this was natural law, because anything that has mathematics embedded in it, such as, for example, the Fibonacci sequence, is natural law. So I said, whoa, I don't know what this is, but this is big. So then I said, I wonder how many of these other scales that I have are actually 7-level scales that had not been developed all the way, because I wasn't developing anything. I was just helping my clients and making notes. So knowing what I was looking for, I looked at these scales, and in a short period of time, they all developed into 7-level scales. And as each one went to the 7th level, it manifested mathematically. Mm-hmm. They all had mathematics embedded in them. So then I realized this is a separate subject. Okay. This is new and different. Nobody has found this before. You see? So that's how I got to this. And that's when I began to write the book.
Wow. So, so when you and I asked you a minute ago about the scales. So were you using this on people that you were treating, correct? So the scales, you said they have 7 levels. So level 1, level 2, level 3. Can you walk us through like these levels of scales that you're using, and what are you using them for?
Okay. First of all, I should tell you what Septemics is. So okay. You and your listeners will have a frame of reference. I should tell you that if we're going to go into each scale, that might take 25 or 30 hours.
Okay, we can't. Yeah, we don't want to take that much time. Yeah.
Right.
Let's give us the run over.
Let me tell you what this is. Right. So Septemics is a philosophical science based on the fact that many phenomena related to humans occur in a sequence of 7 levels. Literally, the word septemics means of or pertaining to 7. Septemics comprises a collection of scales or sequences, each of which breaks down various human phenomena into a hierarchy of 7 steps. There are 35 such scales which span the spectrum of human experience, by which I mean any situation which arises in the life of any person can successfully be analyzed by one or more of these scales.
Okay.
It's universally applicable because it's natural law. Now, of the 35 scales, 24 of them apply primarily to individuals, 11 apply primarily to groups. So now, when I discovered this, I said, wait a minute, this is a book. I can go from helping people by the hundreds to helping them by the millions by putting this data in a book and getting it out.
Mm-hmm.
So then I started writing the book. The first draft of the book was completed in December of 95, and I sent it out to colleagues of mine, all of whom had graduate degrees in varying subjects. They all loved it.
Mm.
They had different comments because everybody's different, but they all were strongly impressed by it. So then I knew, okay, this is big. I have to write this book. And that's when I started writing the book. And I spent the next 25 years working on this book. Because you have to realize, first I had to discover the phenomena. These are undiscovered phenomena. Now, most of that was done by 95, although I did find 3 more scales as I was writing the book. Then I had to take this phenomena and craft it into a workable philosophical science. You have to realize, as an engineer, I'm only interested in 2 things. I'm interested in results and facts. Nothing else impresses me. So I was determined to craft something that would be foolproof, that would work for everybody. Then I had the problem of expressing this in a way that would make sense to the average reader. And that took a tremendous amount of time. The book was rewritten many times, and as I did each rewrite, I sent out copies of it to clients and associates and friends and such, and got feedback. And using that feedback, I adjusted the book. And after 25 years, I said, well, I'm not going to live forever. This book is workable. I'm going to release it. So that was 2 years ago.
And just for the audience looking right now, there's Jim's book right there. And go to Amazon and have at it. There are some very, very strong topics in there, and Jim's explaining everything right now so eloquently. But we're still, when you was talking about Septemetics, and I didn't hear you.
Septemics.
Yeah, Septemics. Okay, and we talked about that a minute ago. And I know you gave us your journey, but you discovered Septemics while you were treating patients. That's kind of how you.
That's right. It just appeared to me empirically. I just observed it. You have to realize, let me give you some context. People have asked me, what book is your book like? And I have to tell them in all candor, having gone to school for 28 years, I don't think there's ever been a book like this before. But each of the 35 scales is expressed in what you might call a spreadsheet or a table. So you look at the corresponding subject, and there's this table of data. Each one of those tables is like the periodic table of elements that all scientists use. It's the same type of a thing. Now, when Dmitri Mendeleev discovered the periodic table, there was chemistry already, but he revolutionized it by making it easy to understand, easy to learn, and easy to teach. And so that same table, although it has more elements today because we've discovered more, is in every physical science textbook and every physical science classroom in the world in whatever language is relevant. That is what this book is like. There are 35 subjects, and each of them has a periodic table, which tells you the meaning, the dimension, the sequence, the fabric of that. Now, I think what would help at this point is if I read you the names of the 35 scales, because then you'll know what context this is. Does that
Okay.
make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So this won't take long. So these are the individual scales.
Okay.
The scale of basic purposes, the scale of personal influence, the scale of choice, the scale of permeation, the scale of thought, the scale of identity, the scale of evaluation, the scale of motivation, the scale of control, the scale of stopping, the scale of scholarship, the scale of literacy, the scale of human ability, the scale of memory, the scale of spiritual identity, the scale of mental deletion, the scale of aberration, the scale of physical fitness, the scale of justification, the scale of belief, the scale of equanimity, the scale of attack, the scale of conflict, and the scale of reaction. And these are the group scales: the scale of relationships, the scale of life spheres, the scale of government, the scale of civilization, the scale of survival, the scale of management, the scale of exchange, the scale of communication, the scale of allegiance, the scale of sexuality, and the scale of politics. So
There.
you can see each one of these subjects has 7 dimensions to it. In other words, it's like a spectrum. So let's take the area of thought. There are 7 levels of human thought, not 6 and not 8, 7. Now, the fact that each of these has 7 levels is of extreme benefit to the reader, because in order to find your level or another person's level, you're selecting from among 7. In other words, if I were to stop some guy on the street here and say, "What is your wife's motivation toward you?" He would look at me like I was from Mars. He would say, "How can I know that? There are thousands of motivations." And I would say, "No, there are actually only 7 basic motivations, and here they are." And if he looked at that, because he's selecting from only among 7, what would happen is, in a matter of seconds, I'm talking about 15, 20, 30 seconds, he would have a bracket. He would say, "Well, she's somewhere either here, 2, 3, or 4, something like that." And I'd say, "Okay, now read the text." And he would read the text, and I'd say, "Okay, look at it now and tell me." And he would say, "Oh, now that I read the text, she sees it level 4. Her motivation toward me is level 4. So you see, he just clarified his mind, his perception about his wife, and that will benefit their relationship. Then he can find his own motivation toward her, you see? And if you take what I just explained in the last minute and blow it up 1 billion times in every direction, you get what this book is about. So let me tell you concisely how this is beneficial to your listeners.
Okay.
Each of these 35 scales provides the user with an infallible way of determining the salutariness or beneficialness of any group, individual, or activity. If the group, individual, or activity moves persons or groups up these scales, it's beneficial or positive. If it moves them down, it's detrimental or negative. More importantly, just finding out what level you or another person is at on any scale is by itself enlightening and beneficial. And finally, once you know the actual level of any person, whether it's yourself or another, on any scale, you can improve that person by moving them up 1 level at a time. So if you're at level 5, your target is level 4. If you try to go to 1, 2, or 3, you will fail because it's too steep a gradient. So I have solved the gradient problem that has beset humankind for 6,000 years. Many people, including very bright people, can see they have a problem, but they don't know how to fix it because they don't know the gradient. I'm giving you the gradients. So, for example, say you have a buddy who's having relationship problems, right? You say, "Fred, come over here. Let me show you something." And you say, "Look at this scale of relationships." And he'll look at it and he'll say, "There's a scale of relationships." And it shows right there are only 7 levels of relationships. So he can think about his relationship with his girlfriend in this context. You can say to him, what level is your relationship with Gertrude? And he'll say, well, it's looking at this, it's either like, I don't know, 4 or 5. Say, good. Now read the text. So see, now he wants to read the text because he's already finding something there. So he reads the text. And now you say, okay, now that you read the text, is it 4 or is it 5? And he will probably say, it's 4 or it's 5. He'll give you a definitive answer. So you just help this guy understand his relationship with Gertrude. You see? Then you can say, take a look at this scale of sexuality. If you are not compatible with someone on this scale, no matter how smart or nice you are, you will not have a successful romantic relationship. You've seen this. You have 2 people, they like one another. They may even love one another, but they can't have a romantic relationship. It doesn't work for them somehow. And it's because there are different levels on this scale that are not compatible. So you don't have to be at the same level, but go ahead.
Right. So Jim, why is Septemics significant? Why is it why the average, everyday person, why would it be significant to them?
Okay. Each of these scales has an axis against which to evaluate human behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Combined, they empower one to understand, predict, and manage human affairs to a degree hitherto unattainable by most.
Okay.
The data in this book are vital for every human being and can help you to achieve your goals faster and easier by explaining what might otherwise seem to be inexplicable or random. If someone were to invite you to a rendezvous, you would certainly expect them to tell you the time, the date, the location, and perhaps also how to get there. Needless to say, it's very difficult to get somewhere if you don't know where you are, don't know where you're going, and don't know how to get to your destination. Now, this sounds idiotic, but most people do this regularly, which is why they have trouble. This book solves that. So we were talking about this friend of yours, Fred, right? And you showed him these 2 scales to look. So you could also say to him, Fred, look at the scale of permeation. Permeation is the basic action of a spiritual being. The reason why you get sensation from your body is that you're permeating it. When you die, you stop permeating it, and there's no more sensation from it. When 2 people are in love, it's because they are permeating one another spiritually. So the more you permeate something, the more love there is, and the less you permeate, the more hatred there is. So he could look at this and say, well, yeah, I can see that I'm not so good at permeating. You see, he finds his level. And now that he found his level, he can start moving himself up 1 level. You can never skip a level. Sometimes it seems like you skipped a level because you went through quickly or easily or without noticing. Think of it this way. If you're on the 1st floor and you want to go to the 5th floor, one way or another, you have to go through the 2nd, the 3rd, and the 4th. Whether you take the elevator, the escalator, the stairs, or go outside the building and use a rope ladder, you've got to go through 2, 3, and 4. That is what these scales are like. This is good news because once you find your level, you have to find the correct level, which, by the way, is not as difficult as you might think, either for yourself or for another. Once you find it, then you know what to do next. You go to the next level up. So you know exactly what to do to proceed, to improve the situation.
So
this is like a book for life.
Absolutely. So how does a person at this point then, Jim, use Septemetics to help others, such as family members, friends, maybe even business associates?
Okay. Right. So I just gave you an example. If you have this hypothetical friend named Fred, right? Who's having a relationship problem. You just showed him these 3 skills. On each one of these 3, if he finds his level, he will have a realization. he'll say, oh, I see. This is where I am. Now he knows where he is, and he knows where he's going if he's going to improve. He also knows where he'll end up if he fails, which is the next level down. So you can do this with anybody in any problem. So let's say a parent has a child who's having school difficulties, right?
Okay.
Very common problem. There's a scale of scholarship in which I tell you the 7 levels of scholarship. And I explain in that chapter with specificity how to make someone a better scholar. So the first thing you do is you say, Johnny, come over here. Let me show you something. And you say, here, read this glossary. So he reads the glossary because there's a glossary in front of every chapter. And then you say, okay, now look at the scale. Well, it says right there, scale of scholarship, so he knows what it is. And you say to him, well, where do you think you are in this scale, right? And he'll say, well, he'll find a bracket. He'll say, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4. And you'll say, okay, now read the text of, and he'll want to because he's interested now. See, he found himself, sort of. So he reads the text and he comes back and says, now that you mention it, I can see actually I'm at level 5. That's not so great. And you say, okay, now let's move you to level 4. And you work with him using the instructions in that chapter, and you will make him a better scholar without hiring a tutor or anything else, because you know the steps. And this works across the 35 axes that I told you about. Now you have to realize each one of these scales is unique. If you study them, you'll see that. It's
So
not like
does
one is a version of
right. So does Septemics apply to everyone?
absolutely.
Okay.
It cuts across all demographics. It doesn't matter about race, ethnicity, gender, age, socioeconomic level. None of that matters. This is hierarchies of human phenomena. If you're a human, it applies to you. Now, I should tell you right away, every person is at some level on every scale. It's there waiting for you to figure it out. Now, you can ignore this data if you wish, but that's like ignoring the signage on a road. When you take your car out, it's all kinds of signage. Stoplights, stop signs, no left turn, dotted yellow lines, solid yellow lines, etc. If you don't follow that signage, you're going to get in big trouble. You can lose your license. You can kill somebody. You can crack up your car. You can have your insurance raised, right? All kinds of bad things can happen because you didn't use the data that was given to you. Some engineer calculated that this curve should be driven at 35 miles per hour. Some civil engineer did that. So you better comply. Because if you don't and you hit a patch of ice or an oil slick, you could go right off the road and kill yourself. So that is what this book is like. It tells you, here are 35 roadmaps that cover all of life. And so if you want to know how to function in any one of these, you look it up, you find your level, or you find the other person's level. So for example, let's say you have a boss, right? You're not getting along with your boss. You could look up your boss on the scale of basic purposes. Now, what could possibly be more important than knowing someone's basic purpose? That is what the person is trying to do all the time. For example, I can tell you the basic purpose of every president of the United States, going back as far as Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and many of the presidents previous to that who I studied, such as Lincoln and Washington and Jefferson. So when I look at this person, I know what he's trying to do. Now, I'm not going to tell you what that is because it's counterproductive to tell someone's level, whether it's yours or another. If you have a friend and you want to help him, don't tell him his level. It might be perfectly obvious to you. What you do is you give him the book and you say, find your level. And when he does, he will be happy. Whatever level it is, he will be happy because it's the truth.
Once again, we have the book Septemics. The Hierarchies of Human Phenomena, Analysis, Prediction, and Management of Human Affairs by Jim Marshall. And Jim, I know you've talked about these levels, these scales, that the 7 scales. Can you tell us about one of the scales?
Well, there are 35 scales. Each one has 7 levels. So let me talk to you about the scale of basic purposes.
Okay.
And this is what I call a general scale, meaning you don't apply it to specific contexts. Like before, I talked about scale of motivation. You could apply that in 50, 60, 70, 80 ways. What is my boss's motivation toward me? What is my motivation toward him? What is my father-in-law's motivation toward me? What is my motivation toward him? You see? And you could go on with this, and you can basically parse your whole life with this one scale. But you don't want to be limited to one scale. There's 35 scales. Now, the scale of basic purposes is a general scale, meaning once you find your level, you're done. That's it. But it is a life-changing experience to know your basic purpose, whatever it is. There are only 7, okay? And you have a basic purpose that's at one of these 7 levels. So when you find it, now for somebody like you who's into expansion of consciousness, this might not be difficult at all. You might say, well, yeah, I can see I'm right there. So what that does is you throw out the other 6 levels. You just throw them out. They don't apply to you, right? Let's say you find you're at level 2, okay? Very high level. That explains your life. As you go through your life, you'll see, and you think about your past. Now I understand. For example, Abraham Lincoln was a leader, which is level 2. And when you study him, which I did many times, you see he is a perfect example of a leader. He fits all the parameters of a leader. It's not obscure. I'll tell you something else. People tell you their levels. If you know the material and you listen, the person will tell you his level on any one of several scales. Let's say there's a scale of choice, okay? And you could say to the person, how are you about choices? And he'll go bop it, bop it, bop it, bop. And within a minute, you'll know what level he is, whether it's high or low. Don't tell him. But you might want to say, take a look at this scale and see if you can find where you are from among these 7 levels. And he'll probably find a bracket. And after he reads it, he'll probably find his level. And when he does, the light bulb will go on over his head. And he'll say, well, this explains X, Y, and Z. So, when I look at a person, it's in a matter of minutes or seconds, I find them on these scales. I mean, it's as difficult as going to a garden and spotting a flower. If you say, Jim, come and look at my garden, right? I go in Jason's garden. All right, you've got roses, you've got tulips, you've got forget-me-nots. You've got all these different flowers, and I can identify them. I probably couldn't identify all of them because I'm not really a botanist, but I could identify most of them, okay? So it's no big deal. I could look at this and say, oh, this is a tulip. You have very nice tulips here, right? Somebody who doesn't know anything, like a little kid, doesn't know about these. He says, oh, yeah, I see these flowers that grow right out of the ground. They're very interesting, right? That's how tulips grow. They come right out of the ground. They grow from the bulb. That's different from a rose. A rose grows on a bush. Different thing. Rose has thorns. Tulip has no thorns. So
the average person that's listening to us that goes out and buys this book, and they start reading it, and they start seeing all the scales and the 7 levels to all 35 scales, and they're wanting to integrate some of these things into their job, into their daily life, and people are trying to gain wealth. What exactly, specifically for that person, would you say?
Okay. Here's what I tell all of my students and clients when you get this book.
And people who don't, and people also that you don't know, just your average everyday person.
Well, I'm talking about the way I advise people who have the book, because it's relevant to your question. What I tell them is, this is a textbook on a new subject. Study it the way you would study a chemistry text, a physics text, a math text, an economics text, meaning you start at the first line of page 1 and you go through it carefully using all the glossaries. There's not only a glossary for every chapter, there's a glossary even for the introduction. So I'm telling you what the words mean, okay? Every level of every scale is defined in the glossary. So, you come to a word like subversive, okay? That's the lowest level of the scale of basic purposes. Person might not know what that is, okay? You look it up and say, I see. This guy's a subversive, once you understand what that is. And so you'll bump into people like Adolf Hitler, for example, was a subversive. He was at level 7 on the scale of basic purposes. So you asked me about a particular scale, and I said I'm going to tell you about that. So the lowest level of the lowest basic purpose is the purpose to destroy. Now, this makes no sense. Many people cannot get their head around the idea that there are people who intend to destroy. And if you study World War II and Adolf Hitler in particular, you can see that he was destroying everything. He didn't just destroy the enemies, he destroyed his own army, he destroyed his own officers, he destroyed his own country. He was destructive. He did such destructive things that he made himself lose the war. So if he were sane, meaning not at the bottom of the scale, he could have won that war. There's a half a dozen different ways that he absolutely sabotaged Germany's chances of winning that war because he's destructive. He's inherently destructive. Up from that at level 6 is what I call the criminal. The criminal is not inherently destructive. He's motivated by pleasure. He wants pleasure. Could be drugs, alcohol, sex, whatever. So he does not particularly want to kill you, but he will if you get in his way. So, if this guy is going to make $1 million on a cocaine deal, and you get in the way, he'll kill you because he wants that $1 million so that he can buy women and champagne and things like that. I mean, if you study professional criminals, that's how they are. That's what they want. They're not interested in enlightenment. They're not going to read this book. They're not going to watch your show. And they don't want to expand consciousness, okay? Up from that at level 5 is what I call the loser. A loser is not somebody who's doing badly. It's somebody who sabotages himself. His objective is to suffer. Now, again, this makes no sense to the average person. Why would a person make himself suffer? Well, if you look around the world, this makes a lot of sense. One guy kills himself with drugs. Another guy kills himself with alcohol. Another guy kills himself by overeating. Another guy kills himself by being in bad relationships. And another guy jumps off a bridge, okay? These are all people who want to suffer. If you give this guy $50,000, he'll blow it in Vegas. If you give him a new car, he'll crash it. If you give him a new house, it'll burn down, okay? He is going to make himself suffer. And once you know what you're looking at, when you spot somebody like that, you realize you can't help this person. If you try to help him, you're opposing his most basic purpose, which is to suffer. That's what these people want. So you get some guy, you say, look, I know you have a drug problem. Let's get you into drug rehab. I'll pay for the whole thing. The guy says, no, I don't want to go. Because he's going to make himself suffer, right? So 6 months later, he ODs. He kills himself. Okay. So we had a lot of suffering and an early death. Okay. Gotcha. That's what these people do to themselves. That's who they are. Up from that at level 4 is what I call the normal. This is the largest demographic group. These are people that have a job, they have a house, they have a car, they have a house payment, a car payment, they have a couple of kids, they take a vacation in the summer. They're normal people. Like if you watch The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet, which was on TV for 15 years, that's what it's about. It's all about normal people, Oh, let's take the kids to the football game. Oh, we have to go to the meeting, the Elks Lodge. They're normal people. They don't want to set the world on fire. Those people, their objective is conformity. Now, you might say conformity is not a good thing, but think of it in terms of fitting in. They want to fit in. When people let their hair grow, they let their hair grow. When people
Gotcha.
cut their hair short, they cut their hair short. Okay? This is not somebody like Jeff Beck, right? The great guitarist. He had the same haircut for 60 years. He didn't care if the stuff was in and out. He knew this is what I like and I'm going to do this. Okay? So on the
Well,
scale of choice, he
mhm.
was high. See? He was not a conformist, which is why he created a way of playing the guitar that was totally unique. Nobody can play like Jeff Beck. There's a great guitarist, but they can't play like him. Okay? He was not
Absolutely.
normal. He was above that. Above that is level 3, which is the winner. The objective of the winner is wealth. Now, wealth doesn't just mean money, it depends on the context. If a
Mm.
guy's a professional football player, wealth to him means winning the Super Bowl, right? And I think they get a ring, a unique ring when they win,
Yeah.
just like in the World Series in baseball. They get a ring. That ring means something, okay? And he'll keep that and treasure it for the rest of his life. Because every baseball player in the world starts out 6 years old in Little League or something, wants to win the World Series. So when he finally gets there, that's wealth to him. Or an actor who wins the Academy Award. He puts that trophy on his mantle. Okay, that's wealth to him.
Yeah.
So these are people who want to win. Fitting in is not good enough for them. They want to win, whatever it is. Then above that, level 2 is the leader. The leader is down for the struggle. Most leaders have terrible things happen to them. Abe Lincoln, Alexander Hamilton, they were leaders, okay? And if you study their lives, it's not subtle. It's very obvious that they were leaders.
Right.
And they were both killed prematurely, okay, by people who didn't like what they were doing. So then at the highest level is the saint. The saint's objective is transcendence. Saints are not interested in the things that most people are interested in. They don't want money. They don't want fancy clothes. They don't want notoriety. They want to transcend. Now, the way that person articulates it will depend on his culture. Like if you talk to a Christian about transcendence, he'll say, well, I want to die and go to heaven and become an angel.
Right.
That's his idea. Whereas if you talk to a Buddhist, he'll say, well, I want to attain nirvana. So they're both trying to transcend. So a lot of these people you never find out about. They're in monasteries, they're in ashrams, they're hermits, They're not interested in playing the games that most of us play. They don't care about money. They'll wear the same t-shirt for 30 years if it doesn't fall off them because they're interested in transcendence. So
Well,
those are the 7 basic purposes. And
and
everybody is at one of those levels.
I mean, so eloquently explained, in such an in-depth, not in-depth, but a good enough scrape off the top to give the viewers a peek at why they should go purchase this book and why they should give it a try. Septemics is something that's new, like you said, and you treat it like a new course. And I'm certainly going to get out there and purchase that book and start to integrate some of the practices into what I already do. So I really thank you, Jim Marshall, for coming on the show. It was a pleasure. All the studies you've done with human potential and development has culminated into this book. And I know that there are a lot of other things that you do as well, but I'm excited for what you've discovered, and people should take note. They should really observe it and see if it's a good fit for them.
Right.
Yes, sir. Okay, so hang on for me.
I just want to say in closing to viewers,
Okay.
if you can read English reasonably well and you want to improve yourself or your life, this book is for you.
Absolutely. Okay. Is there an email address or a website you want to leave with the audience?
Yes, I invite your people to go to my website, septemics.com. That's Septemics, where you can see what many readers have said about it, what many journalists have written about it, what the reviews are, and you can read sections of the book itself. And even there is a recorded explanation by me, 15 minutes long, of what Septemics is, introducing you. So you can listen to that. And by the time you get through it, you'll say, okay, I get it.
Septemics.com. That's the website right there. Go to the website, people, and look at Jim's work. Look at Mr. Marshall's work. Fabulous work. This is the type of reading material, Jim, that I love to devour because it's new and it's something that's different. And I like the challenge to continue to expand my consciousness. And that's why I have a multitude of guests on the show. But hold on for a second, Jim. I'm gonna move you in the back and I'm gonna close it out and come back and talk to you for a second. Fabulous, fabulous. Jim Marshall, an intellectual guy who has devoted over 50,000 hours to study and practice multiple dimensions of human potential and development, and stumbled upon Septemics, and what an awesome system that Jim has put together. You have to go and get the book. You have to go and teach yourself something new. Teach yourself something different. Don't stick with some of the same old things that you've been reading about or looking at. Go and open up a book that's totally different from anything that you've read before. And that is one of the calling cards to beginning to embrace your consciousness and expand your consciousness, and a prelude to your spiritual awakening. But I am so happy that you guys have come to join us again, and we'll see you the next time. Thank you so much. Remember, if you want to find us on YouTube, we're at Expansion of Consciousness. Follow us. We're going to have a variety of different people speak on topics that continuously have you thinking and expanding your consciousness. We'll see you the next time. Thank you so much. Take care.